Hey everyone. Thanks for joining my Google Tag Manager Q&A session for the intermediate users. If you cannot hear me, please use the chat widget next to the video player so that I could then respond and to fix the sound quality. So if any problems occur, or if you have any questions related to Google Tag Manager, let's say in general, just use the chat widget next to the video player and I will try to help. If someone can write in the chat that they can hear me, that would be great, because I'm not sure whether I'm talking to, whether I'm, I don't know, talking alone, even though I see that some people are watching. I guess we can wait a couple of more moments and then I'll start with the slides. I have collected several questions. Well, a bunch of questions related to Google Tag Manager. So we'll take a look at how can we approach them and so on. Yeah, cool. Hey, Robert, thanks. Thanks for your response. Thanks for the confirmation that you can hear me. Is the sound good? I mean, am I too loud, too quiet? Cool. Okay, so without further ado, I guess we can start with slides and with questions. Oh, hey, everyone. Yeah, so the first question is, well, I mentioned somewhere about that when a refund happens outside GAGTM, then that information should be sent via measurement protocol, and that's usually the case, because if someone wants to get a refund, let's say for a service or for a product, they usually contact the support team, and then support team decides, or accounting decides, whether to issue refund or not. However, in this case, if a website has an on-site refund request feature, for example, they can fill in a refund form where they can, let's say, request a refund. So what would be the best practice right here? In my opinion, I would say that, well, it depends on how that refund request feature works. If I can immediately get a refund just by myself, basically, well, do a self-service and get a refund, then I would definitely implement refund tracking with Google Tag Manager and actually not send the refund with measurement protocol. So for example, if I, let's go here, so Simo Hava enhanced e-commerce, this is the guide that you should always use, or of course you can also use my resources that I have mentioned in the course. So let's say if a visitor can do basically can get a refund without having, let's say, company's employee help me to get that refund, then definitely you can ask a developer to activate a data layer push that would send a refund information. So in this case, that's the refunded order ID to the data layer, and then by following the usual practice that I explained in the course, then you could send this data with Google Analytics event tag to Google Analytics. So once again, if I can get a refund by myself without needing to wait for, let's say, for approval from an employee or so, then I could just ask a developer to implement this data layer push, or if it's possible to refund, to make a partial refund, then this data layer push could be pushed instead. So not only order ID would be pushed, but also the refunded product. However, if that refund feature is basically just, let's say, a request feature, but it still must be processed or reviewed by an employee, maybe by an account, let's say, billing department, then I would still stick with measurement protocol. So I would ask so basically what would happen is that when a visitor let's say fills in the request form, maybe you could track that with Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager as an event, just a regular event without without e-commerce data, so that you could just basically see, well, how many people are actually requesting the refund. And then when let's say an employee reviews the refund in, I don't know, let's say CRM, well, not CRM, but maybe some other, let's say, backend system where they have to approve or decline that request. Only then, when the request was actually approved and well, the refund was actually issued, only then a programmer should send the refund request to Google Analytics directly via measurement protocol. So measurement protocol, for those who don't know, is basically like an API that allows you to send hits directly to Google Analytics from basically anywhere, from your, let's say, from your website, from, you can send from your app, from, let's say, point of sale, whatever. I've actually even seen how people are sending hits from their office refrigerator, just for fun, in order to track their coffee consumption. But that was actually just like, well, a project for fun. So if a visitor can do everything by himself or herself just to get a refund, then you can definitely track with Data Layer and with Google Tag Manager. If that process still requires some people to verify, then most likely you should use the measurement protocol. For those who don't, maybe they missed that, there is a bonus lesson in the course, in the bonus module, where I don't know, maybe 10 or 20 minutes video where I explain how to, well, basically some basic introduction and how to use measurement protocol. So if you missed that, go check it out. If I recall correctly, I used that exactly for a refund tracking with measurement protocol. Oh yeah. So that's it for this question. Then the second question is, I'm curious, where do you draw the line with adding, with what to add in Google Tag Manager? Does having too many triggers or templates or whatever start slowing down site down? And well, this question is actually from two parts. So this is the first part. So the short answer is yes. The more items you add to Google Tag Manager container, the slower it becomes. Well, first of all, the more items you add, the heavier container becomes. So the maximum size of the container is 200 kilobytes, which, even though it doesn't sound like too much, but imagine like if you have a code which weighs like 200 kilobytes or more, then most likely like you have a lot of things that could be optimized. And then for example, if that container includes like, let's say, 20 tags from different vendors, so you can imagine that all of them will probably do some things with the document object model, with the website, and well, they will affect in one way or another the performance of your website. I mean, you cannot avoid that, because every script you add to a site, I mean, does something to your website. Well, not necessarily like slows down the experience for the visitor, because maybe that script, usually scripts are loaded asynchronously. However, if you add, let's say, multiple tags from multiple vendors, they will definitely, well, let's call that a necessary trait in order to get the result. I mean, if you want to get some leads, some data to track, maybe to remarket some people, well, that's a necessary thing you need to trade in order to, well, to make the website's performance a bit lower. Well, that's how things work. And the next question, to which answer is a bit more philosophical, but that's actually a good question. So it seems like an endless amount of ideas that can be added to Google Tag Manager, but at some point it must be too much. So where is that line? When can you know that you have added too much, or basically, well, or maybe you are crossing that boundary of adding too much stuff in Google Tag Manager? So in this case, I would say that first you should focus not on cool things, but on valuable things, valuable for business, valuable for analysts, for marketers, to make insights, to bring some value to the business. So for example, in this case, well, let me just switch to webcam. So basically, in this case, what you should think is that first you need to start thinking about what are the business objectives. Is it to increase revenue? Maybe to I don't know, to capture some leads, to increase the number of phone calls and so on. So when you have those main goals, then you need to measure them, you need to track them. So that's so that's actually what is the most important for you to think about. Then when you and basically your main goal should be not just implement everything cool that CMO Hava releases every week, even though most likely you don't even need those things because, well, they are some things. For example, weather tracking in Google Analytics is not useful for many businesses because maybe they are not affected by the weather. However, don't be fooled. My main message is that you should not implement all the cool things that you see in Google Tag Manager, or let's say in other blogs that teach Google Tag Manager. So even though I have, for example, a blog post that says, hey, this is 99 things that you can do with Google Tag Manager, you should still think and consider that not all of them are actually needed for you, because they might make your website slower. They might give some garbage data that is totally unnecessary for you. So in this case, you should always think about, is this particular tracking setup valuable to reach a certain goal or to measure some important action? So if, for example, you want to track leads, newsletter subscribers, maybe, I don't know, white paper downloads and so on, then it makes sense for you to track that most definitely. But if you, for example, are working with an e-commerce, let's say online retailer, and you are thinking about implementing weather tracking, I mean, you could do that for a quite short time. Let's say for a month, just to see whether that makes sense. And if not, then get rid of that and move on to another thing. Don't just do not try to create a let's say a garbage bin full of a hot mess full of various cool things, but that nobody actually uses. So in this case, if you have, let's say, if you want to track various things and you have a lot of ideas, I would say fail fast. Try to implement, see if that gives you some ideas, let's say for 2 weeks, for 4 weeks. And if after a month you don't see any value in that, remove and move forward. Because if you actually gather all these ideas and build a pile of all the cool things, but you actually don't use them, well, eventually you will see that your container will be larger. So this means that your website will be a bit slower, and it will be just too noisy for you to actually let's say properly get some proper insights. So that's why I would say less is more. Try to track less, but try to track what is actually the most valuable. So I see a question. I'll just take a look. Is there a way? So Andrea asks, is there a way to quickly determine the size of my container to assess if I need to scale back or optimize? Actually related question. So in Google Tag Manager, I actually don't have that large container right here, but right now, here's what you will see. So basically, I will show you two options. So one option is that in here, if your container has reached 75% or more of its maximum capacity. Well, sorry, I forgot to share. So now I'm in Google Tag Manager. I'm in versions. So in versions page, if your container is actually reaching the maximum capacity, so it has reached 75 or more % of the maximum capacity, then you will see some sort of like a progress bar that will say that, hey, like you are reaching the maximum capacity. So you should think, you should need to reorganize your tag, maybe optimize some things. So if you don't see that, it means that your container weighs 75 or less % of the maximum capacity. The other option could be, let's say, I'm not sure whether this will work, but it should work, I guess. Let me just open the network tab, and then I want to see a request of my Google Tag Manager container. So here it is. This is the request that downloads my container. So this is the container file. And if I save this, let's say on desktop, and then show in folder and see the weight, I see that the weight is 112 kilobytes. Well, I'm not well, honestly, I'm not sure whether this is that real weight or whether there are some other things that are a bit minimized. So I'm not sure about that, but definitely if you don't see that 75%, let's say like a notification or something, you're safe. And if you do that, I mean, if you see that notification, then one of the first things that you should optimize is custom HTML tags, because most likely they are the things that weigh the most. If you are using some standard functionality, let's say Google Analytics tags, some built-in triggers and so on, I mean, they, of course, they have some weight as well. However, if you are using custom HTML tags, this means that you will have many more lines of code added to the container. So for example, if you're tracking, let's say, if you have tried to track Ajax forms, you know that in order to track them, you need to add over 200 lines of code just to make sure that you are actually that you're able to see those requests in the preview and debug mode. So in this case, the more you have of that custom stuff, the more the higher chance that your container will be large. So always try to review your custom HTML tags, also custom JavaScript variables as well. Then Atik has another question, so we can take a look at that as well. So is there a way to track the Wix videos via Google Tag Manager, sort of the way we can track YouTube videos? I haven't, I don't remember if I have tried, or maybe I have tried. So let's say Wix Google Tag Manager guide. So basically the question is, how can we track Wix videos in Google Tag Manager, because they have some issues. Let's take a look. What do I have here? Maybe I have something. Actually, don't even remember. No, unfortunately, I don't have anything about Wix video players. So if YouTube video tracking does not work for you, you can try this YouTube GTM not working. That's the magic keyword that you will find this article. Then there are some tips that you can try in order to make your YouTube trigger work. I'm not sure whether they will work on Wix, but you can definitely try. In fact, you can actually try to mix, like, for example, option 1 and option 2. Sometimes it takes even let's say the combination of option 3 just to see how just to see whether that will work. Yeah, another question. Oh, cool. This time we're a bit more active on the in chat, so I can definitely answer that question. So could you give your, so Tanya asks, could you give your opinion on this case? A website has grown over time and they are tracking different subdomains with different GTM and different GA properties. So yeah, and the continuation of that is, I'd recommend removing all GA and GTM codes, putting the same GTM container as main and on all subdomains. So basically use the same container, same GA property, and gather all the traffic together. So basically, in a nutshell, is that there is a bunch of websites, a bunch of different GA accounts, but properties, bunch of different GA containers. So what should you do? In that case, like if those websites are a part of a single experience of users, let's say, well, of users' journey. So for example, if a website has a blog, let's say if a business has a blog, a website, an e-commerce store, some support page, and so on, and they all serve the same user basically to increase the revenue, to support them, and so on, then definitely I would suggest using the same Google Analytics property. So, I mean, that all data will be gathered in the same property. Then you will see how those visitors are visiting, let's say, one part of the website, the other part of the website. Of course, for that, you would need to use the show full URL filter in GA. So that, because by default, Google Analytics shows only just the page path. But if you have, let's say, multiple websites and they are using different domains, maybe even like totally different domains, not just subdomains, you need to somehow distinguish, well, how will they look in your reports. Of course, you can use the secondary dimension, which is hostname, but that is not very convenient, like in most cases. So you could actually just enter show full URL filter in GA, and then create a custom filter that will, well, these are the configurations. And in that case, instead of this result, you will see, let's say, yourdomain.com, and then this one. So then you will be able to quickly distinguish whether from which part of that, from which website is the traffic coming. Now, regarding the container, this is not it's not necessary, and actually it's not the best idea to always use the same container for all the websites. I actually have another article which is called, let's see, how many GTM containers do you need? Yep, yeah, here it is. So basically, the main idea of this article is to provide like two different perspectives. So basically, you would need to answer one question in order to decide whether you need to, let's say, one container for all 5 websites, or would it be better to have 5 different containers for each website? I mean, like each container for each website, but those containers would be sending data to the same GA property. So the question is, are those websites quite similar or not? Are they identical or not? So for example, if a business has, let's say, 5 different domains, 5 different websites, and they are quite similar, but maybe just the language is the main difference, and the structure is the same, the content is quite the same, but I mean, you can switch from, let's say, from German to English and so on, then it would make sense to have only one container, because you will be tracking the same interactions both on website A and website B. However, if you, for example, have, let's say, a blog like I do here, maybe I would also have, let's say, an e-commerce website, a support page. The things that I will track on those websites will be very much different. I mean, in blog, I would probably track, let's say, subscribers, maybe content engagement. On e-commerce website, I would track enhanced e-commerce things, and let's say, well, everything that is related more with these actual sales. In support, let's say, on a support website, I would probably track, let's say, support tickets. I don't know. Also, how many articles were read, and so on. So in this case, since like the setup for each different website is quite different, it might be quite difficult to, well, it will be quite challenging to manage your tags, to make sure that they are firing only on one website, but maybe you don't want to track that same thing on other website. So in this case, it will be much easier to basically isolate the tracking setups for each website and use separate containers, but they will be sending data to the same Google Analytics property, because Google Analytics does not care where the data is coming from. Is it coming from one GTM container, or is it coming from multiple GTM containers? So in this case, so basically, if tracking setups for each website are quite, let's say, unique, I would go with separate containers, but one GA property. Basically, GA property, like a single GA property, is no doubt. I mean, no question at all. It should be one property just to track that single, let's say, single experience of a visitor. Because, for example, if a visitor finds you via Google, he lands on, or she lands on a support page, and then from that support page they go to, let's say, to a blog or to the main website. So I would like to track that visitor's traffic source as organic. But if you have, let's say, separate GA properties, this means that the support page will track it as an organic, but the main website will track it probably as a referral from your support page, or as a direct traffic, depending on your configuration. So I hope that answers the question. Robert has another question. So is there a way to view data layer object that gets created when it happens on a button click for placing an order, but it doesn't appear on a subsequent thanks page? So basically, is it possible to view the data layer before the page redirects to a thank you page? I mean, am I right? If I did understood that incorrectly, please correct me. So if I understood the question, Robert is asking, is it possible to preserve the data layer object before the page redirects? Yeah, you could do that. So there are several techniques. So preserve data layer. Basically, data slayer as an extension could be a solution. Then, well, preserve data layer. Oh, sorry, preserve. Yeah, so persist data layer in Google Tag Manager. This is one resource that could be used, but I personally prefer using, let me just check one thing. I will just quickly inject this container. I'm using the Analytics Pro's Data Layer Inspector because the Tag Manager Injector is now a paid solution, and I mean, it would be, I could pay for a solution, but it just does one thing, which is like quite simple to, I mean, I could do that plugin probably myself, even though I don't code. So when there are some other alternatives that do more things and they are still free, I prefer using them. So this extension is great. Let me just inject this one and I will take a look. And I will quickly create a, let's say, an all elements click trigger just to enable the auto event listener. Refresh, then do it here. Well, one of the ways is if, well, it depends on a situation. So for example, if I visit a thank you page just after a click, so you can just hold the control key and let's say hold control key, click home, and then you can still continue seeing that click here and see what is happening in the data layer. Then another option, actually this one is really cool that I like. Prevent page from redirect and GTM. Well, there will be another Simo Hava's blog post. So I actually use this one. So this one is quite cool. And this also applies to form submissions and basically other things that redirect a visitor from one page to another. So in this case, what I would do is, well, where is it? Yeah, so basically what you need to do is that the option 2 is really cool. Well, of course, there is like silly option that is also mentioned here. So if you try, for example, you click a link, then you try to hit escape key on your keyboard, and maybe it will manage to cancel the redirect. But the option that always works for me is this one. So the option number 2 in that blog post of Simo Hava, which is called prevent clicks and form submits from redirecting. And then option number 2 is this one. I copy the script. Then I go to this page. I open the console, so I'm on a Windows device, so I can press just F12. If you are on Mac, you can do that by more tools. Well, basically menu, menu, more tools and developer tools, and then in the console, you can clear all that stuff. And here's what you would do: you just paste that code and hit enter. You will see the undefined message. That's fine. And then what this message will do, basically you are adding a listener that will block the page from redirecting when it notices that the page is going to redirect. So in this case, I now will click the home link, but I'm not holding anything on my keyboard. I'm just like, if this code was not added to the page, not added in the console, it would just simply redirect me to another page. So now I'll click on home, and that listener actually shows this message. And now what I need to do is that I need to click cancel. And once I click cancel, you will see the data layer push that would have happened before the redirect, but the page will actually not redirect. So take a look. Now we have the click and number 8. Once I click cancel, the click number 9 will appear, and the information within that click will actually be related to that home link in the menu bar. So I will now click it. I clicked cancel. Here's our new click event, and here is all the information that was pushed to the data layer and was available at that point in the data layer before the redirect. And the redirect actually never happened, of course. And then if I want to then later properly test the tracking once again, then I refresh the page, click reload, and then if I now click, let's say, the home link without holding any control key, then the page will work properly. So basically, when I'm pasting this code in the console, this happens only within the boundaries of my browser and within that page view. So if I refresh, I clear the console, and that JavaScript will not work anymore. So basically, this is really cool, and I usually do that. Then what you can do is actually use, let's say, a source. Sources, go to the sources, if I'm remembering correctly, or no. Don't remember that. Let me just remember. I actually forgot what I wanted to. Oh, yeah. So basically, you go to sources, you go to then expand here and go to snippets, and then you can add new snippet, which is this one, and then you just rename it. I don't know, that's something. So right here we have like script snippets number 5, but I actually had this from the previous things, from the previous situations where I was using that. So whenever you want to, let's say on another page, do the same thing. So instead of Googling and looking for this solution, you can just actually open a page that you want, on which you want to prevent redirects, then open the developer tools, go to sources, snippets, and then open that snippet which contains the, which you have created from, let's say, as a template for future use. And when you do that, you just, if you want to run this code, you click somewhere on this code, on here, hold control key, or I probably guess that on Macs that should be command, and enter. And that code was run and it was activated, and then this redirect will work. This redirect prevention will work again. So quite cool thing. I also remember that there was another trick how to do that, but I guess that we can skip to other questions like instead, because I think that they are more useful. So if anyone has any other questions, please use the chat. I really actually like that format. This is probably the first time when people are so active in the chat. So if you want to get answers to your some of your questions, please do use the chat widget. In the meantime, I have some other questions. Yeah, that we can answer. So this one should be the long one, but probably also quite useful for those who are not who haven't found their best, most optimal approach and process how to work with projects, with analytics projects. Of course, I don't think that this is the most optimal thing, but I don't know the better one. So right now I'm using this one. So the question is, how do you plan your tracking setup? And this includes GA events, mixed marketing pixels, tags, triggers, variables, and so on. So the question, to answer this question, actually we need to go, let's say, at least 1-2 steps back, because every project should not start with tracking setup. Tracking setup is only, let's say, a third step in my process. Usually before that, you need to even let's say, evaluate your priorities and what should you actually like track. It doesn't matter which tool are you going to use, but the first thing you need to think about is, well, basically which things to track at all. So in this case, a rough process that I usually follow is this one. So the first thing is that when I have a new project, I try to talk with stakeholders, basically people who are involved with the project, who want my help and so on. So in this case, I usually do, let's say, a video call if they are, if their office is somewhere far away, or we can do a meeting, or and so on. And then, of course, I follow up and ask some additional questions via email because, well, usually not all questions can be answered really quickly by clients because, well, maybe those questions require more time to dig into. Then after I have, let's say, answers to certain questions that I ask, then I do the measurement plan. But I also try to do that with stakeholders. Then, only then I start thinking about tracking implementation, about what things should be tracked, and, well, basically how those things should be tracked. And then I prepare tasks for IT, then do the actual configuration, then do the testing, launching, monitoring, and improving, and, well, basically making sure that things will continue working properly. So this is actually, as you can see, this there is no analysis right here because this is just preparation for the data collection. Now, if we take a look at, so basically to answer the question of that previous slide, which is this one, so basically how do I plan my tracking setup, is in order to plan that, I need to complete those first three steps. Let's say the list of questions, there is no one correct list of questions. So the questions probably will depend on the client, but here are some of the questions that are quite universal that you can apply in your interviews. Usually interviews might be a bit longer, not 1 hour, but probably 2 hours. So this is more exhausting. So you should prepare your clients just to say hey, this will require a bit more time. Don't do longer calls like 2 hours. Even if you have a lot of questions, I would say maybe you should then split into 2 separate calls because 2 hours are already quite exhausting. And if you want to, let's say, invite more people and for a longer time, you should consider just splitting an interview into 2 parts. So the question about the interview. So usually what I ask is that, let's say, first, I need to understand what are the main objectives of the client. Well, usually, of course, that can be, let's say, revenue, but there are some other things as well. So, for example, maybe they want to increase their brand awareness, e-commerce revenue, because based on those objectives, the outcome of things that you will track will be different. So, e-commerce revenue, maybe they want to acquire more leads, maybe they are, let's say, a non-profit organization and they want to track, and let's say they want to attract get more donations, then phone calls, user support, and so on. Maybe they are a subscription-based, let's say, SaaS business. So then maybe they are more interested not just in activation, I mean the first conversion, but actually in retention as well. So answers to these questions to this question will lead to more questions. So don't be afraid, ask them just to better understand and to try to be on the same page as the business is. And in the very beginning it will be really hard because every business is unique, so you need to just talk through with clients and to understand better what they want to what is their goal, because you will need to adapt their tracking setup to meet those goals. Then what are the KPIs? Maybe they are aware of, maybe they already have some KPIs, and for example, or maybe they don't, or maybe they do have, but those KPIs are just pure garbage. For example, maybe their KPI is bounce rate or number of page views. Well, I mean, number of page views might be a good KPI for, let's say, a publishing website, let's say some news website, where actually the more page views there are, the higher the revenue is based on the advertising. But for most businesses, page views are not a good KPI. So in this case, I mean, it will be better to understand for you what is important to them, because if they have some, let's say, if they have some KPIs like revenue, return on ad spend, this means that they have at least some clue about what things to track and what not. And if they don't have anything, so this means that you are working with a blank piece of paper. So in this case, you will be the person who should actually enlighten them and to tell them and to educate them what things are worth to track. Then what what let's say marketing efforts are is the client let's say doing to achieve those goals that were asked in the first question. So let's say if their goal is to acquire leads, to I don't know, to get more calls and so on, then let's say you could just basically ask like what exactly are they trying to do, how are they trying to reach those goals. So for example, maybe they have an app. So if they have an app, this also might give you some additional questions like, are they tracking that app? Are they, doing some? Are they trying to link the same users on website and on the app and so on? So do they track that? And maybe also a good question is to ask, what are they? Let's say. What other websites do they have to reach those objectives? Because basically what I usually ask is just I ask for a list for, let's see, can they list all the domains that they are using, and subdomains as well, because then when I get the list, I have a bunch of questions like, okay, so what does this website do? Why do you use this website? Why do you use those websites? Okay, so we have like this domain, so are you using some, I don't know, let's say Unbounce or Marketo landing pages and so on. So in this case, asking a lot of questions about the business and how are they operating will help you better to understand it. Now, speaking of marketing initiatives, you could ask like, are you doing paid search, paid social advertising, email marketing, SEO, affiliate, and so on? And let's say, well, I mean, there are like a lot of different things that they can do online, like to attract more traffic. So you need to have more questions about them, because about those initiatives, because then you will better understand like what tools maybe are they using, are they tracking all of those initiatives. So for example, if they are using affiliate marketing, are they tracking those affiliate let's say transactions in Google Analytics or maybe some other tool? So in this case, most definitely in knowing their efforts, what they are trying to do, how to track the traffic, will definitely give you more questions, and most likely you will get some answers. But the main goal of this interview is actually not to get all the answers, but actually to get a lot of questions, to raise a lot of questions, just to know that, well, we need to do this and that, and then you will have start getting a better understanding, and the client will start thinking about their business from a bit different perspective, because you are a neutral person who's working with them, who tries to better understand them, and your questions I mean, you don't know their context, you don't know the context of the business. So then you, like with like having a blank piece of paper in your mind, you can ask like questions like, why are you doing this, why are you doing that? Because people who are involved in the business, they might be working on some things too long that they will not even notice that maybe some things are just, well, useless or maybe just worthless, because they are working with the project so long that they cannot just think objectively, while you can. Yeah, and you can ask like other questions, like maybe what kind of custom data about the users do they have, or have they identified some valuable segments? Maybe they are using some segmentation. So for example, maybe they think they have identified that, okay, so let's say people who are from this country, and let's say the age between this and that, or maybe coming from that certain traffic source, that they are bringing more revenue. So I mean, knowing that upfront will give you a bit better understanding of what is going with the business. Do you have an in-house developer, and how busy are they? Because, well, this is like really important question, because if you want to go like really advanced with Google Tag Manager, you will realize that a developer is, well, unavoidable. I mean, you can do a lot of stuff all yourself by yourself, but if you want to implement, let's say, enhanced e-commerce tracking and have a solid setup that will not break after a week or so, then definitely you would need to ask a developer's help. So knowing the capabilities of, well, how flexible are they, are really is really valuable. And from my experience, if they tell that developers are quite flexible, usually they're not. But in this case, I mean, if they tell you that it's impossible to get their time, so this means that, well, it will be definitely really hard to do that. But maybe you can, I don't know, let's say, advocate for getting some time from a developer, just to get things done, because this is quite important. Yeah, so list of the domains that they are using and so on. What tools are they using, like Facebook Pixel, Marketo, I don't know, LinkedIn Pixel, and so on. Yeah, so once you get that, then you go to let's say, go to measurement plans. And then you need to think like, okay, but once again, I do that with the client. So once I got a lot of questions, I got some answers from the clients, but definitely not all of them. Then what I do, well, basically at the end of the interview, I then do a summary of all the questions that were answered, all the questions that were not answered, and then I do a follow-up. And then I give that client, I don't know, several days, maybe a week, to respond to those questions, because some questions are really, really time consuming, because, well, maybe they are touching some infrastructural important things. But in this case, well, the second batch of answers will be received via email. So then I start working on business objectives. So based on the answers that I got from questions, I can then think like I can, well, basically this scheme that I will show you was borrowed from Avinash Kaushik. This thing is called, let me just show you, digital, I always forgot it, digital measurement model, Avinash, I guess it was called digital marketing and measurement model. So basically, I recommend reading this guide, because this is really cool thing, just to get a better understanding of how to get started with a project, of analytics project. Yeah. So anyway, I definitely suggest you reading that, and then let's go back to slides. So then first, what I do, I start with business objectives. Now, basically, this is the most important thing. How, like, why does that business exist? So, well, usually the business, as I've mentioned, exists because of, it wants to increase revenue. It wants to, I don't know, do something else. Well, if it's non-profit, then get more, let's say, donations and so on. But these objectives are not necessarily related just with online. These objectives can be just, well, these objectives are just general objectives of the business, like the reason why that business does exist. Then the next step is, well, what kind of goals or what kind of objectives can a website or mobile app, or let's say online presence, can help achieve. So in this case, let's say a website can help create awareness, because, well, maybe that's important for a business. Then business is very interested in generating more leads, and those leads, well, they might eventually turn into some customers. Then, well, from this example, we could skip the highlight events and actually turn this into, let's say, a revenue. So let's say once people that are aware of the business, they then turn into leads and then eventually convert. And then the next question is, how can that website particularly can help achieve those goals? So in this case, for example, let's say we can create awareness by doing some online advertising and to drive more traffic to the website. Then, speaking of leads, well, the website can generate more leads by, let's say, offering to download some white paper, or to subscribe to a newsletter, or maybe to download some cheat sheet, and so on. So basically, like I would write down here a list of various things that a business can does in order to generate those leads. Yeah, so right here, and then let's say if we have, let's say, the revenue, so then we can increase revenue by like one of the ideas could be, let's say, offering more products or increasing price, or I don't know, to increasing the conversion rate and so on. So, or I mean, increasing the number of sales. So once you do that, well, of course, you can. If you continue reading Avinash's blog, you will see that there are also some KPIs and targets. But in this case, let's say we can start only with these, with this level, and then once you have the list of goals that a website must achieve in order to reach the business objective, then you will know what to track. So, for example, right here, if we know that the goal is to generate leads, then the thing is basically what I would have done here is that I would have written the list of all the possible places where that lead can be captured. So let's say a registration form, a pop-up, embedded form, I don't know, something else. So once I have all those items listed here, these are the things that I will track, and I will need to think about them in my tag implementation plan. Now, if we're talking about revenue, right? Then, and if the business has no idea about e-commerce tracking in Google Analytics, then the next thing that we should do and implement in track is that we need to implement the enhanced e-commerce tracking right here. If goal is to, I don't know, to do something else, let's say to support clients and let's say, well, to help them better know your product and do that by giving them, let's say, articles in the support knowledge base. Then we could also track, let's see, well, obviously page views, but also new tickets, then let's see, chats, and so on. So then when you know the real goals of the business, then you know which ones are valuable and worth tracking. So instead of doing, some weather tracking and some cool thing but irrelevant, you're doing something meaningful to the business, and you're actually looking for you're actually thinking about things that should be actually tracked and will give you a better sense of whether business is succeeding or failing in order while trying to reach the goal. So then when you prepare the measurement plan, so I mean, you can write it down whatever you want. It can be in the same structure in Google Sheets, and I usually actually do that in Google Sheets. So basically just several columns for each goal, for each objective that the website can help you achieve. And then I start with tag implementation plan. So now I am thinking about, okay, so what to track, what to plan. So then what I usually start, I just write down all the important events and objectives that I want to track. Well, that not I want to track, but I think that the business will benefit from that. And of course, you can involve stakeholders here as well. At least, well, not all of them, but at least the closest one, just to to get approval whether they think that this is valuable or not. So basically, all the items that you have written right here, so you can add them here. So if we want to track, let's say, a lead, because this is registration is not necessarily a purchase, because maybe they can register for a free plan. So in this case, registration can be, let's say, also like a lead. Then let's say newsletter subscription, white paper download. I also like to track errors because then you will see not only what is happening positive on a website, but also what is happening like wrong. So if, for example, you have a funnel and then you see that, okay, so people trying to do this, and then they get the error, fixing the error will actually has a chance of I don't know, having some positive impact on your conversion rate. So then when I have just list of items that I want to track, then I usually, since I work with Google Analytics, then I add category, action, and label. So these are the three fields that can be used in event tracking. Well, in the new Google Analytics, there will be another naming convention, but this is the Universal Analytics naming convention. So then I start and just try to enter them. So for example, right here, I see that, okay, so the category is, registration, cool, but these are errors. So I could categorize them as error right here. Then since newsletter subscription and white paper download is the same lead acquisition, I use the same category, which is lead. And then you do that with the same thing. And then basically your goal is to have as little categories as possible. And you want to have huge, like large buckets of event categories. Then the next step is to add, let's see, action, and if possible also labels. So in this case, you can also, for example, if I click in event reports on error, so would I expect to see next? I mean, what would be valuable for me to see in Google Analytics reports? So for me, it would be valuable to see what kind of error happened. So in this case, page not found is one type of error, then login error, and then checkout error. And like if I click on the login error, I would like to see what kind of error happened. Like was, I don't know, password incorrect, or I don't know, something else. So in this case, when I drill down in each level, I expect to see some new information that might give me some insights. Yeah, and then so this is, let's say, one sheet for Google Analytics. Then I do the same sheet but with different columns for, let's say, Facebook Pixel, for other vendors. So for each vendor, I do separate sheets in Google Analytics. And the final result of, let's say, Google Analytics sheet might look like this. So here's the event type, tag type. Then could be some, let's say, event description or tag name or whatever, and then condition. I used to write really precise conditions and think about them ahead, but right now I decided to be not that specific, because what I've noticed is that I used to spend a lot of time on planning those exact conditions, and then when I started implementing them, it appeared that almost about 50% of all my setup, of all my planning, was not useful, because, well, it's not useful, but was not correct, and I had to adjust the plan accordingly. So this was really time consuming. That's why I decided to just, let's say, add something more just plain English, more down to earth. So for example, I could write here, when someone clicks the donate button in the menu bar, or something like that. And then when you have, let's say, your tag implementation plan, then you can see what kind of variables, what kind of data will you need. So for example, right here, if a registration occurs, I could ask a developer to push two parameters to the data layer: authentication method and registration step. If an error occurs, I could ask a developer to push to the data layer error message, and so on. So then having that plan will help you better know what kind of data ask from a developer, and then you could use that in your task descriptions for a developer. And yeah, so for each vendor, I create then a separate spreadsheet. So this is the question number 3. Then we go to the next question number 4, and I see that we have only a couple of minutes left. So I will answer several questions in the chat instead, because the next question is also quite large one. So the question from Atik in the chat is, I see that there is a need to use JavaScript many times in Google Tag Manager. What JavaScript course or book would you recommend? Now, this is still in my to-do list as well, and I'm not very good with, I would say that I pretty much suck in JavaScript. So my plan for this year, but since the year has already ended, so the plan failed. So my plan for the next year is to learn at least some foundations of JavaScript. To learn some more things than I know right now, just to achieve certain tasks that I need in Google Tag Manager. So what I plan to do is that I plan to take the course from, I'm not sure which one. I have 2 options, and I will try both of them. So Free Code Camp JavaScript. So this is a free JavaScript course. Also, I saw they have a video like 4 hours long. YouTube Free Code Camp JavaScript. So that also can be something cool. Yeah, so 3.5 hours. Yeah, so this guy next to a bus will teach you how to code JavaScript. So since if I want to learn something really fast, I prefer using video material. Well, that's why I created the course, my courses as well. So I would think that I will start with this video. I will probably also enhance some experience with more written technical stuff. And then another option is Code Academy, if I'm correct. Code Academy or no? No, I don't remember that. There was some other, but basically I plan to definitely use the free code camp just to do some stuff, because I have several topics in mind. Which should I learn? So for example, I'm planning to learn how to manipulate, let's say, objects, arrays, so that I could work with the data layer a bit more, in a bit more advanced way. Maybe build some objects for the enhanced e-commerce and so on. So these, and basically, yeah, object and array methods, that would be really cool. Then I have some ideas about the, some ideas about, I don't know, maybe, well, I just actually forgot right now. Yeah, so yeah, sorry, I lost the thought, the train of thought. So yeah, Tanya is also, looks like she's recommending the free code camp, so I will do that as well. Oh yeah, so I remembered. So the next thing I plan to learn is, at least I'm go a bit more in depth with DOM scraping, even though that I know that this is a bad technique. I mean, not a bad, but a fragile technique. I would like to understand that a bit better, because right now I know some JavaScript. I know quite enough to do my tasks, but I still feel some limitations. So I have ideas. Maybe, well, I would like to within, over the course, like over the next, let's say, 6 months, to learn some things, just enough so I could do my job, not not to learn everything, because you cannot be a professional JavaScript developer in over like 6 months. And since I have to do a lot of stuff as well, I mean, I need to work with clients and write blog and help you guys. So I just don't have the opportunity to spend like 3 years learning full-time JavaScript. So I prefer just learning enough to, well, I never plan to become Simo Hawa, but I would like to achieve some things that basically I want to do on my own. So yeah, I guess that's it. And yeah, so thank you for your patience. Looks like this Q&A was quite successful. Sorry, Rodrigo, there was not enough time for your questions, so I will mark that down, and I will try to include that in another session. I'm not sure when the other session will be. I guess when I will start getting some questions about the need for another session, then we will do that. So thanks for coming. And yeah, thanks, bye, and have a good, let's see, I don't know, in Lithuania that's evening. I will gonna go home right now, but maybe in your time zone that's just the beginning of the day. So once again, thank you for your time, and I hope that you found this Q&A session valuable.